Hello, ladies. I hope you're doing well today and enjoying your home and having great plans for its improvement. I'm Mrs. Sherman. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just so honored because you could always be doing something else. And I hope to keep you company while you work, just like we did when we played the radio in the old days and we had to do mounds of laundry or dishes. And so today I have already done a few things on my list. I usually make 50 things and do 3, but I was determined to do as much as I could while it was still daylight. So I have gotten ready, and that's the preparation. And you know, when you get in their vital years, that's pretty good. That's pretty significant if you can say that you got dressed and ready for the day, even if you didn't get much else done. And I got the kitchen cleaned. And I got some laundry done and hung on the line, brought back in, put away, because we had a very hot day and things get dry quite quickly. I have still some things to do. I did some outdoor watering, and I went to the grocery store. I wrote down my schedule list and a few of my notes for talking to you today. And the purpose of this is to have a little company while you do something maybe tedious and you don't want to watch something. So that is why I don't show you how to do things, because you could go to a craft blog and find out about that, or you could go to a cooking video and find out about that. So I'll just let you do that, and I will just talk about other things. And also I've got a little bit of correspondence to do, and I have to order a few things, and I have a few things left on here to do today if my stamina holds out. And so let's get started with what I usually tell you to do, and that is to get dressed, because it might seem like it's just going to take a lot of time that uses up your energy, and then you could be doing something, getting something done instead. But I think that it makes you more determined if you're dressed, because now you've gone to the trouble to get dressed, you might as well do some things. And I was so happy that I got dressed early enough that I could go to the grocery store before everybody else was there. And that's one of the advantages of being at home, being a homemaker, is you can choose the times to go out when there's not a big rush. Like, I wouldn't go after work is over, because everybody's rushing in there at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and sometimes a little earlier. So I don't even go then. I go in the morning before noon, and then I don't often am the only one or just one of 2 or 3 inside of the shopping area. So that's quite pleasant. And so I wrote down on my list, and I wrote a list of every room in the house today. And I did a little bit of tidying up in each one, just kind of spiffed it all up. And then I wrote on the list next to, I have room 1, room 2, I wrote like or dislike, or has potential on it. Had you ever thought about that? Like or dislike? So I gave a couple of them a like and a couple of them a dislike. Yes, and so other than that, I have sewn a new dress. The fabric is called batik. It's a print that is kind of it's like a tie-dye, and it's all these different shades of aqua tie-dye, and then it has a print of autumn leaves stamped on it. And so I'll get up and try to show it to you a little bit here. I don't know if I can get back far enough, but we'll see. We'll try. We'll give it a try. This is what it looks like. And it's a cotton, so I can wear it around the house. And of course I have a red apron to wear over it. And then to go out, I have a red jacket that goes with it. And I even made a little hair clippy too. And it feels good to have a new dress. And at first, I ordered this from a catalog, and when it came, I didn't like it at all. It's just the strangest print. I'm used to little tiny English flowers, English prints, and I didn't like it at all. And I have a free table out there every week where I put things, and other people come too and contribute, put things we want to give away that have some quality or value left in them, so people that need them can pick them up. And usually everything is gone, but this piece of fabric nobody wanted. So I went back out and got it and put it in my shelf with my stash. And then I got to thinking, what if I get sick or have to leave this house, and my granddaughter comes and finds amongst all that beautiful fabric this crazy print. She'll just maybe wonder about, what my state of mind was. So I hurried up yesterday and just sewed a dress out of it. And actually, I quite like it. And my family gave me a lot of compliments on it, probably because it was different and not that same one that I was wearing all the time. Now, last time I talked to you, I had been reading about homemaking and getting, homemaking, and I read from The Fascinating Girl. I'm not going to read from that today, but I had a little section in here about homemaking where there was an assignment, and I was quite interested in this because it also includes a teacher's manual, I think, in the back of it. I think that's what it is. And one of the assignments was cook a good meal this week that is nutritious, tastes good, it is on time, it's within your budget. So I would give my daughter a certain amount of money, take her to the grocery store. This is, I would say, around 15 years old, and have her go through and buy what she could with that money for the meal that she had planned. And I would be by her side, but she would do it all. And then she would do that as an assignment, and we enjoyed that kind of thing so much. And that's the type of thing that you can do if you're a homeschooler or not, if your daughter is willing to do it. And then there was a cleaning assignment. Thoroughly clean one of the following rooms: the kitchen, the bathroom, the refrigerator, and the carpets. Now, people don't really have carpets so much anymore. It's now all hardwood floors. And of all these things that I would want to clean, I would say the kitchen would be the one that I would choose. What would you choose? Kitchen, bathroom, refrigerator, or carpets? You end up doing it all anyway, but if you had an assignment and you wanted to choose one, which one would you choose? And then I would go through and I would have a list of things to check off that gave her a like or dislike, such as cleanliness, smells nice, good appearance, looks refined, has a finishing touch, looks welcoming, and we just check all that stuff off. It was so much fun, and I've done this with girls around 8 or 9 years old, that wanted to have a class. And what I have found out is if you don't get them at 8 or 9 years old, they will sometimes never ever be interested in it, in homemaking, because they're actually so indoctrinated into another system, the public school system or even any kind of school system, that they don't have it bred into them by their home. So now she has another assignment: sewing. Sew an article of, this is all for the homemaking unit. Sewing. Sew an article of clothing. Now, when I took this course when I was very young, the teacher was, I looked at the teacher's manual. I had a teacher's manual once. I don't know what happened to that. But it suggested to the teacher you bring someone in who was kind of an expert at all these things, and she brought in someone who knew about sewing, and she gave us all a piece of fabric and had us make something while we were sitting there with just a needle and thread. And it was anything from a little square cushion or a little bag with a handle on it, and or I'm thinking other things that we made, and we made them in class while she was talking, so that we could have something to take home, just to give everyone a taste of it and to have them have success before they left. So then organizing was another subject in the homemaking section, and this is for girls that are still at home or single, living away from home, and it was organize your closets and drawers and organize your priorities. And the teacher would explain what the priorities were and what would come first. And I kind of have lost my page here, but it was talking about the things that had to come first, and they were things like, the important things were the meals, the cleanliness, the family comfort, the clean clothing. Those were important. More important, I think, than decorating or any kind of other interest. And so they had in the workbook a place to list the things that were the most important, and we had to list, and it did say in the book which things were the most important. And it was the most important things in homemaking. So I want to also move on to Winsome Womanhood, which I read to you last time. And since it was addressed to a 15-year-old girl. But since I identify as 15, I think that I could get a lot of use out of this book. And, it's never too late to start over and have a happy youth. And so the last time I had read it to you, it was talking about conversation and mentioned that a girl should read good books so that she would, quote, be interesting. And afterwards, for a whole day, I kept thinking about how misleading that could be to the modern generation, because when this was written in 1900, that would have meant something completely different. It would have meant don't go talking about dull things that nobody's interested in, that just put them to sleep or don't have any interest, such as when you lost something and how you found it, or just things that when you're in a group of people, or even with one, cannot spark anyone's interest, and to be careful what you talk about. And she mentioned that they had to be, quote, interesting, and so she said you should be, reading things, and so that you'll have things to talk about. And when we took this other course, Fascinating Girl, when we were really young, we were told, the same thing, to be well read so that you could be interesting. But the one thing that homeschooling helped with is we were more discerning about what to read instead of just reading something, so that we would be careful what we talked about, and probably not good to read a book that would irritate somebody if you talked about it, or would offend someone. So I began to question what she said about being interesting. That would have been totally differently taken than it is today, because today, if you were to put that in some kind of a course for young girls, you would probably mean be the life of the party, don't be too quiet, and yet sometimes that's not very good for people, especially young girls. And I've known some young girls that were just more reserved and more quiet, and it served them well, because they weren't likely to make friends with the wrong people that would lead them astray. Sometimes people would try to, quote, get them out of their shell, and it was always a disaster, because once they got out of their shell, they became emboldened and sometimes made very poor decisions. And so I just questioned that, whether or not that's really a good thing. What we learn from the scriptures, what I did with my, here it is, my Bible, is things like faith, virtue, patience, self-control, goodness, loveliness, things like that. That's the kind of things we need to build up, not worry about whether or not we are interesting, because we don't have to be interesting to everybody. In fact, I know some of you don't agree with anything that I'm saying, but you're listening, and it's not interesting to everyone. And I don't choose to listen to things that I'm not interested in, but that is a kind of a fallacy, where you're doing well if you're popular, or you're doing well if you are interesting. It's sometimes better just to keep to yourself, not reveal your whole personality to everyone. Have some things, I forgot what it was called, to have some things in reserve. And so that's what I would say, is don't speak all the time of everything, and don't reveal everything, and you don't have to be too vivacious. So now I'm going to read about, I think I've lost my page, about friendship. And I said I had read sometimes about friendship before on here. And it talks about, and I read this to you before, but it continues on the part that I didn't read, so I'll read this to you. And A girl never permits herself to comment unfavorably upon one friend to another. If she has a complaint to make, she carries it in person to the individual whose attitude has puzzled her. Loyalty is the life breath of real friendship. We hurt each other sometimes by our blunders, as when our hard, unmeaning hands we thrust among the heartstrings of a friend, but we never do this on purpose, nor do we discuss our friends and their shortcomings and infirmities with anyone under the sun. And she mentions Galatians 6:2, bear ye one another's burdens, is the inflexible law of friendship. And I think everyone has experienced having been talked about or walked in on somebody that was talking about you. And I can remember hearing a lady who had overheard someone discussing something about her, and she finally pulled the lady aside and she said, I understand why you might be upset with me, but could you please, in the future, insult me privately, insult me to my face privately, and complain to me privately, and don't tell all these other ladies, because it makes the family look bad, it makes the church look bad, it's just a very bad thing. So you tell me when you're upset with me, and don't talk behind my back. Say it to my face. And I thought I never would be brave enough to do something like that. And one of the dangers of a public school is you get people that are all together in a group, same age, and no one teaches you not to talk about the other students. And so everybody's talking about everybody else. They go home, they tell their family all about the people at school, and that's when gossip begins, is when you get with a group that's very low adult student ratio. And so no one's monitoring this, and sometimes things that they say about each other can just get away, and they don't know how it happened quite, but it's something that they're never warned about in that situation. Okay, so here is a paragraph that's aimed at older people concerning their attitude towards young friendships. Now, of course, we know, especially those of you who are homeschooled, that we're very guarded, and we guard our homes, we guard our families, we guide our children into good, wholesome reading and good, wholesome friendships and good, wholesome activities, and they're learning at our elbows, and we're at their side. Sometimes older people smile at the sentimentality of the young. I've heard people despise sentimentality, like people who remember their grandmothers and something they did, and they want to go see their grandmother's old place, and they'll just sneer at that, Sometimes older people smile at the sentimentality of the young, but this only occurs when the youth has waned from their own souls. What is sentiment? It is the sheen on the seashell, the perfume on the rose, the velvet smoothness on the roughened surface of a hill as you watch the evening light. When one loses the spontaneity of a child and the fresh enthusiasm of youth, when one's point of view becomes cynical or materialistic, that person will scoff at the beauty of youthful friendships. So we have to be careful as we get more vital not to be a downer, not to be too negative, but also to be cautious. A girl's friend, you're going to hear a lot of tractors going by. Sorry about that, but I'm not going to be able to shut the door. It's another hot day. A girl's friend explains her even when she is a puzzle. If she chooses friends carefully, if they are refined, cultivated, and lovely, she has herself the same qualities, because they say your friends tell you what you are. They did. If you know someone and they're your friend, they have some of your qualities. And if it's a vulgar person or a person that is very worldly, it can rub off on you. The girls who are satisfied with loud-voiced, vulgar, and mean associates condemn their own judgment and label themselves as belonging to the lower behavior. Now, there is a scripture that talks about blessed is the man who is always honoring. He shall walk with kings. He shall not walk with mean men. Now, mean did not mean the same thing as we think of someone who's mean and they're angry. It was mean who had very low standards. External situations of money, of dress, of expectations, of easy or hard fortune have nothing to do with friendship, which is founded on other things than these shifting conditions. Yes, shifting conditions. Do you remember I read to you a few years ago on here the story by Washington Irving? Was he the one that wrote The Knights of the Round Table? I'm not sure what he wrote. 1800 something. He had written an essay called The Wife. And speaking of shifting conditions, the story begins that he was talking to his friend and saying, I don't know how I'm going to tell her that we've lost our fortune and all the banks have crashed, and I no longer have, we cannot live in the fine house in London that we've been living in. We're going to have to move to this little cottage in the country, and it's not going to be easy for her. And he just was wrestling over that and almost lost his health over it, and finally had told her. And his friend said, well, how did she take it? And she said, oh, like an angel. She took it like an angel. But I dread to go home now and see her in this rundown cottage because I don't know how she's going to take it, So I don't know how she's going to react to that. So he went home down the long path home, a lot further away from work than it used to. And I might have this story printed somewhere as a link on the sidebar. I always thought it would make a lovely, fun play to do. And he went home and he heard her singing. He was just dreaded to open the door, but she wasn't in the house, and he heard her singing and went out towards the back. And there she was picking apples or something. And she saw him and she said, oh, you're home. Oh, she said, I've found the loveliest apples, and oh, everything, it smells so good, and the birds are singing, and I love all the fresh air. And she was just so happy that he was extremely humbled, because he had been very embarrassed and ashamed that he had brought her to this after what she was accustomed to. And I think she'd even washed the clothes and hung them outside. And so when his friend asked him, well, what happened? He said she just was blossoming in it. And so when it talks about here, the reason that I remembered that is that it says, friendship has to be founded on other things than shifting conditions. And I have known people, I'm sure you have too, that tried to make friendships with people who were seemingly successful, and then when these people ended up not so successful, in fact having to start all over again, they weren't as interested in the friendship. We call those fair weather friends. When the weather is good, it's fun to be happy and with a friend, but when the weather is bad and there's hardship, it's not as enjoyable to some people. But that's a fair weather friend. Only friends when things are going well. And some people, we get married and we hope to get a little better off. We start out maybe in a real lowly place with nothing, no furniture to speak of, and we hope to get better off and maybe move to the next better thing. And by the time our families are well established, maybe have a piece of property and everything. But some people, for them, they go backwards for some reason, and should realize that it's the character that they develop that is the most important. And so we could talk a lot about that. We don't want people to deprogress. We want them to go forward and to get better off. But the fact is, the friendship has little to do with shifting conditions. It does not matter whether a friend lives in one room or in a great house. Have you ever tried living in one room of your house just to see what that would be like? Just spending most of your time there, setting up your little writing desk and in there, getting a few books in there, and just trying to see what it would be like to live in one room of your house. Just choose one and see what that would be like to live in small quarters. and we've had a lot of fun. We've done so many things in our house. We've pretended we're on a cabin on a ship, on a cabin on a train, on we are in a different location. We have done many things in our home that have imagination connected to it, and not so much things. External situations of money, of dress, of expectations, of easy or hard fortune have little or nothing to do with friendship, which is founded on other things than shifting conditions. It does not matter whether a friend lives in one room or in a great house, whether she is dressed well or plainly. Her clothing and her outside state are not parts of her. It does matter if she's well-mannered, speaks in soft tones, uses good language, and has good values. Yes, that would be the thing. Our friends, in our friends, we desire people whose ways are similar to ours, whose values are the same. We want friends who comprehend our ambitions and sympathize in our efforts. And especially if you are raising children, or if you tend to be weak, somehow pulled into things with friends that you shouldn't. We want to be sure that you stay with those who have similar values. It does not mean you're a snob, and I'm sure you've all been told, shouldn't you make friends of people of all different types, that some that maybe don't believe the way you believe, because otherwise it looks like you think you're better than they are. Well, that isn't what it is. That reminds me, the last couple of illustrations I've given you remind me of The Fallacy Detective, which was a book we read that showed how people would give you things to think about that were a distraction, that had nothing to do with the value you were talking about. And because we choose our friends carefully, we want to lead a quiet life, live an honest life, and not be offensive in any way. We do tend to choose friends that build us up, and we can build them up. And I'm sure there are some friends that we need, or they need us, but we have to be careful not to follow their values if they are in some error. Girls may have among their friends a special friendship with their brothers. Sisters and brothers may be devoted friends, but may miss this great opportunity. A young man whose sister is his firm and congenial friend is armed against a multitude of evils. She is oftentimes able to discern and see problems and warn him before they occur. Yes, girls are very alert and sensitive. So I thought that was a good point, to make friends with your brothers. And I have grandchildren who now put on tea parties and celebrations and things for each other, which is nice. Our Lord never said a sweeter word than when addressing his disciples. He gave them a claim on his friendship. I have not called you servants, I have called you friends. John 15:15. To every young girl, in the dawn of her life's day, the Master comes, offering friendship with himself. Blessed is the heart that hears and responds, for to her will be given a hidden manna, the new name, and the morning star. So I thought that was an interesting chapter. We have to also realize that when we are reading things from the previous century, might have a different meaning to them. And so I want to read you a poem from, it was written by William Wordsworth. I am not sure of his dates. Dates, when I say dates, I mean birth and death. But it was one of our favorite poems in homeschool, and since I'm homeschooling you, I'd like to share this poem with you. And I had printed this poem on a blog in the early days when the web was new, and lots of people objected to it because the new, I don't want to call them a name or anything, but this new strictness that came upon everyone, even religious strictness, objected to the words that were in here to describe this woman. When we read it, didn't think about those things at all. They were figures of speech. And so I will describe why I like this poem and what it describes. I have a granddaughter. She's 15, and that's why I'm reading this book, because I know I identify as a 15-year-old. I want to do what she does. I want to go do stuff with her. And she is such a worker, and she will prepare a banquet of tea foods. I'm talking about little bits and bites of everything, vegetables, meat, breads, everything, on this long table, because she's in a large family and all of her brothers and sisters are like her children. And so she prepares, and then when her mother needs rest or isn't feeling well, she takes over completely. She takes over the cooking, the cleaning, organizing, and takes care of the younger children so her mother can recover, whatever. And she's such a hard worker. And then when she comes here, she is allowed to get into my sewing stash, because I'm not going to live long enough to sew all that stuff. And she doesn't use patterns, and so she just takes an old dress, folds it in half, lays it down on folded fabric, cuts it out, and sews it up. It would take me a week to do what she does in a couple of hours, because once I've been trained, my mind was trained to use these patterns and follow all these little rules and stuff, and it just kind of takes the fun out of it in a way. So I never insisted that she learn to do things a certain way. I just wanted to see how she would do it freehand. And she's busy. She's so busy. And the other day we were taking a walk, and I snapped a photo of her ahead of me on this farm road. And for a minute, she was, I would say, a vision of beauty, just for a moment, because most of the time she's hardworking. In fact, on the farm road, she stopped and picked berries and picked apples, and she's so busy. Well, my daughter was the same way. She was just, when one hand was doing this, the other hand was trying to do this, and they were always busy, always interested in things to do at home. And so I took this photograph of her, and you might have seen it, where she was wearing the dress that she had made, and she was walking down the road, and she just looked like a vision of beauty, that's all, but just for a moment. Because once the walk was over, she was back at it again. She was busy. She was going through the books, finding something to read, and then she she found some paper and made a magazine for me on I think it was a month, like the month of October or something like that. She just made her own magazine, and then she finally wears out and goes to sleep. And then in the morning, she's up again, serving tea to people and having just delighting in life, And so this was called The Phantom of Delight. And when I first typed it out on a blog 20 years ago, I had all these people rushing at me, both the ones that were religious and the ones that were anti-religion, and they all hated this poem. So today I'm going to explain what it meant. And also you have to realize the dates that it was written was probably the late 1800s, William Wordsworth. I am not sure he's the same one as William Wordsworth Longfellow. Maybe so, I don't know. But there was one of those that was American, and it was considered the family poet. So phantom doesn't mean anything sinister at all. It just means a dream, just like a dream. A phantom of delight, just a dream of delight. That's what it meant. And it's used as a figure of speech, and what in those days was used that way. She was a phantom of delight when first she gleamed upon my sight. Now this is where everyone was attacking this poem. A lovely apparition sent to be a moment's ornament. They all jumped down my throat, and there were people writing books, even religious people, saying a woman in the 1800s was just an ornament. She wasn't useful. She didn't work. She was just an ornament. And sometimes even in the late 50s and early 60s, a man that admired his wife would say, I'd really like to have you on my arm when we go somewhere. And so everybody said, oh, that's ornamental, that's ornamental. But he would say, yes, as an ornament on my arm. And it was a figure of speech, meaning I am proud to be with you and to be seen with you, and you're my favorite. But, of course, people jumped up and down at this ornament thing, and they tried to prove that the Victorian women were only ornamental. And they brought out modern literature that said that, not the actual 1800s writings that were written, I don't believe for a minute that any of them were thought of as ornaments, because most Victorian women were very strong. Many of them managed huge properties, managed businesses, and monitored the goings of the money in their own home, and even planned the construction of some homes and the furnishing of it. And they were very smart people. And so I want to read it and just remember, ornament did not mean that you were a soulless person that just looked pretty. Although sometimes men would say to their wives, I wish you wouldn't worry so much about everything. All you have to do is sit there and look pretty and be happy. And they didn't mean that that was all you had to do. It was just a saying. It was something that they said. And I don't know why women came to hate this. I don't think men even say it anymore. So let's just read it again with all these explanations. She was a phantom of delight when first she gleamed upon my sight, a lovely apparition sent to be a moment's ornament. Now, an apparition is just like you've seen a vision and a shape or something, but it's all a figure of speech, and this is what makes this poem beautiful. And it's like I described when the girl was this hardworking girl was walking down the road, and she was picking flowers, and she had a beautiful dress and a big hat on, and I thought that just for a moment she was beautiful and an ornament and looking relaxed and happy and young and not busy working. But it was just a moment, and it was just a moment ornament, to be a moment's ornament. Her eyes as stars of twilight fair, like twilight's too her dusky hair. So just comparing her to nature, the twilight, the stars, and the twilight again. What's wrong with that? But all things else about her drawn from Maytime and the cheerful dawn, a dancing shape and image gay to haunt, to startle, and waylay. That's just a playful way of saying she's very youthful and innocent, but it's all for a moment. I saw her upon a nearer view, a spirit, yet a woman too. Now here is where this was emphasized in these courses that we took way back in the 1960s. Her household motions, light and free, and steps of virgin liberty, a countenance in which did meet sweet records, promises as sweet. So her household motions, she was a homemaker. Her household motions. You notice they're very careful in some dramas, historical type dramas, like, for instance, let's talk about North and South with Jennifer L., I think it was. And they had this one scene which was quite remarkable, where she has poured some tea for Mr. Goodness, I can't think of what his name, the owner of the cotton mill. I'm trying to think of what his name is. If you know, put it in the comments. And she hands him this cup of tea, and the camera catches her hand handing it to the cup of tea in such a graceful way, and then the steam coming out of the tea. And I thought, they were very careful to record that, where this was something important in a time when people noticed things like the graceful hand. Who notices things like that anymore? This gracious way that she held this teacup, and so this is why I say this is all figures of speech to describe a very thoughtful and household management person, very thoughtful and yet free. I saw her upon a nearer view, a spirit, yet a woman too. Her household motions light and free. She didn't go around banging and clanging everything. She carefully picked up things and set them down quietly. And when she swept, this is what I would teach the young girls when they came to these little homemaking classes. When you sweep, don't cast dust into the air and get everybody all dirty. Just sweep quietly and don't try to be noticed. Don't grunt and groan and act like a martyr when you're cleaning up the bathroom, for instance. Just go in there and start humming and everything. Nobody's going to notice. clean house and do your household duties in such a with such ease that no one really knows that you're doing it. They don't realize that you've done all this stuff. You don't announce it. You don't go around screaming and throwing things around. So he said, I saw upon a nearer view a spirit, yet a woman to her household motions light and free, and steps of virgin liberty, a countenance in which did meet sweet records, promises as sweet. A creature not too bright or good for human nature's daily food. Well, that just shows she wasn't too conceited to do housework and natural things, For transient sorrows, simple wiles, praise, blame, love, kisses, tears, and smiles. That's talking about human nature's daily food. Sorrows, simple wiles, praise and blame, love and kisses, tears and smiles. This is nature's daily food. And she wasn't too good for all that. Life, like we read last time, life was part good and part bad, and we roll with it. And now I see with eye serene the very pulse of the machine. Well, here's all these women screaming and saying, they called a woman a machine. And poets take poetic license and they use things for figures of speech. They're very good at taking a common phrase and turning it into something else. It's the very pulse of the machine, meaning getting to the heart of this person. A being breathing thoughtful breath. Have you ever thought about this? A being breathing thoughtful breath. A woman that has such focus on her life and her appreciation for the things set before her that she can do that make a difference that help in the lives of those around her. She's not just breathing, she's breathing thoughtful breath. I think that's pretty amazing. A traveler between life and death. Well, that's what we're told all the time, aren't we? In sermons and in the Bible. So it's so many words that we are traveling between life and death. And so what we want to do is leave a good impression, if we can, not everybody is going to be of the same mind as us or understand this or even admire the things that we do at home. But I love this, a traveler between life and death. That just shows you that life is limited. We want to do and serve the best we can while we're here. The reason firm, the temperate will. Endurance, foresight, strength, and skill. A perfect woman nobly planned to warn, to comfort, and command. Well, then here come all the religious women saying, oh, we're not supposed to go around bossing people. But it wasn't there also a poem written by the same man, as unto the bow, so is the cord. It's talking about a bow and arrow, and though she bends him, she obeys him. It's okay to warn, to comfort, and the command part just comes in the things that we do as women that help our people, that help our husbands and our children, not in a controlling way. But this isn't what this meant. And yet a spirit still and bright with something of angelic light. Now, so here come all these people and saying, oh, angelic, they're calling the word angels and they're calling a woman an angel. And so they took away all the fun of and all the joy of what people used to think, what women used to think that they should be, to be purposeful and to be, like you said here, household motions and be graceful and gracious and good and kind. And they kind of just took it all away from us by objecting to these excellent descriptions and poems. Now, not everybody's going to be like that, but it's a nice thing to look to. And it doesn't in any way demean the creation that God made in a woman. It does not do that at all. And it's a beautiful poem showing the kind of the intellectual side and the spiritual side of a woman and the warmth that she has. And there was another poem about similar to this, which I'll read to you next time. Now, there were some things I wanted to talk to you about first that I had written down from observing what I had said last time. Now, one of the values of keeping a list in your homemaking is this. If something or someone's trying to disturb you or get you emotionally unbalanced and upset, so that you can't focus and you can't do anything, you can at least read your list and go and do it, even if you have to do it somewhat more mechanically, at least, and that does help balance your mind. And there was a movie years ago, and I'm going to dare to discuss it with you here, because I think it had a different message than what people were thinking that it had. And several women I was talking to recently about this told me what they thought people were overlooking in this movie, and it was called The Stepford Wives. And there were books written about it that were refuting it, and they thought it was a horrible movie. And yes, it was. It was about this perfect little neighborhood with beautiful houses, some of them the lovely Victorian houses, and the women were perfectly behaved. And what happened was this owner of this colony or community had all the women distributed this pill, and when they took the pill and a bell rang, it set them into action, and they would vacuum or cook or whatever, and they were always beautifully femininely dressed. And I sometimes wonder if it was a backlash against this book, the Fascinating Womanhood, that was written at the time, and mocking it, and everyone just thought it was horrible, and they hated it because it was a terrible way to control people. And the women all had glazed eyes. They didn't know what they were doing, and all they were doing were being robots. Well, I was talking to this lady about it, and I said, wasn't that an awful movie? She says, yes, but you don't realize how they are using it today by the prescription drugs. You get a prescription, and sometimes women will get a prescription because they're feeling a little off, or they're emotionally they feel emotionally unbalanced, and you get on a prescription, and then you're not as sensitive to things, and you don't feel them as bad, and then automatically go to work at the commercial working place and not be homemakers, because it no longer upsets them to have to leave home and go out to work. And I have met people who said that they had quite a conflict with people when they didn't want to leave their homes and go out to work. But after they got on some of these medications, they're psychotropic type drugs that was supposed to calm their nerves and emotions and stuff, they acquiesced and went to work and didn't feel it. And so this lady was saying, don't you think that's just a very similar thing, to put everybody on these allopathic or chemical medications, and then make suggestions to them, and they just go and do it without it. The repercussions of it don't impact them as bad because they're a bit foggy. And so I just wanted to be brave enough to say that to you, that to me, the Stepford wife syndrome, in my opinion, still goes on. And another thing that I wanted to talk to you about was, of course, we know homemaking, and being a homemaker, homeschooler, is all about the people, and it's all about the children. It's not having a perfect house or a perfect homemaking routine. We do try to get somewhat of a routine because we know that the next generation will copy that. It's awful hard to overcome being a messy. If you've grown up where it didn't matter, and then you got married and got into a home where all of a sudden you realize, my goodness, I'm going to have to be more organized, more purposeful. So it's good to bring your children up knowing how to be tidy, but the children are to be loved because they exist. And I recently told one of my grandchildren, I'm always telling you what a great artist you are. And I'm always telling you, thank you so much for doing something for me, moving something, building something, all the things that they do for me, the physical things that they do for me, the great things that they do for me. And some of them are very good speakers, and some of them are already preaching sermons in little churches. And I'm praising them for all this. But I said to this young man, even if you couldn't do all that, let's say that for some reason you stopped being able to do any of these things, I would still appreciate you, love you, and admire you, and be thrilled about you because you exist. Now, wouldn't that be nice? And we often praise people because of their knowledge or because they're so smart. But I think that we should praise them because they're loved and that they were created by God. So I like you because you exist. Another thing I think we need to teach children is how to write home. When you're homeschooling, you can't even imagine that they are ever going to leave you. You've bonded so well and you're enjoying this experience together. You learn together and you can't imagine. And then when they grow up and they do leave, they don't know how to even text you. They don't know how to phone you. They don't know because you didn't play. You didn't practice it. I think it's very important to learn to write home or to learn when would be appropriate to contact your mother, in some way, to communicate with her, And another thing too is teach them how to leave home with graciousness and appreciation and thankfulness and gratefulness, not to leave home in a huff. And how to leave home is to carefully run it past the parents and see if they think it's a good, wise thing to do, and be careful not to just one day say, well, I'm leaving, and worse yet, I have heard of grown children leaving and not even telling their parents that they were leaving. They found out on social media or something. So we need to tell them how to write home and how to leave home and how to behave graciously towards your parents when there are big changes like that. And how to write home is a lot of fun. I have collected old-fashioned mailboxes, the kind that were mounted on the side of your house that had a little lid that lifted up, and the postman would put the mail in. And so we've got lots of those. And so to send letters to each other in the house. And in the old days, before I collected these, I would just put an envelope on the outside of their bedroom doors, some kind of envelope, cut it down so that you could stick a letter in it, and we would write letters to each other and stick it on the door. So they would have letters when they got up in the morning, letters in the afternoon, and they probably don't remember all that, but it's very important to learn how to write home in case it ever happens, so that they write polite and good letters with the information, with good information. I remember a girl that said that she, after her grandmother died, they were going through their papers and work, and she said she found some of the letters she had sent her grandmother, and she said, I wished I had been taught how to send a meaningful letter to my grandmother, something of interest, not so banal and childish, but she said it is possible, and she's raising her children to write letters, so she's teaching them how to write an interesting letter. And if I'd had any sense, I would have brought one of the letters that she gave me, that her daughter wrote to her. So I am next time I'll try to bring the letter. And then another thing that I wanted to talk to you about, and I have a few minutes left, is, of course I go to church, and I was thinking about the preaching and that sort of thing, and I was thinking, a preacher, his job is to make sure that his congregation knows that the folly of vice, and teach your members to stay away from worldliness, smoking, drinking, tattoos, carousing around at night, partying, things like that. And I was thinking that how important the home is, because he can't teach all the little things that you would learn at home with your parents. And while it's good to teach people against vice because it keeps them away from the bad influence, that if you're going to teach someone against vice, they're not going to hang around people that have those vices, and they're not going to seek out those places, because the first thing they'll say, oh, there's drinking going on there, I won't be going there. There's this going on, I won't go there. But how important it is at home, and if a preacher would do this, this would be helpful too, is not just preach against vice, but preach on kindness and gentleness. And if I can remember the quote from Darcy, in Pride and Prejudice. He explained it. He said, Jane Austen, her fictional novel, often people wrote really good values through fiction because you couldn't get in trouble. You weren't talking about anybody you knew if you made up characters. But he said, as a child, I was taught good principles, but I was left to practice them in arrogance and conceit, or something like that. So you can teach people really good principles, like stay away from vice, but you also have to teach them how to practice them with kindness and with gentleness. It's better to be, it's a shame to raise your children up not to have vices and still be too harsh with them, or for them to develop meanness or cruelty. So these things are really important just as much. And let me see if I've got anything on this. Yes, I have something for young people. I know that there are things that we as mothers in homeschooling can't teach. Maybe you don't know how to play the piano, so you want to send them to piano lessons. In the old days, the teacher would come to your house and you'd get to monitor what was going on. But we have to be careful of other teachers because they don't always have the same values. And many times when they learn that you're being home taught, will say things to influence your children. And so I think it's really important because children and adults, we form bonding and relationship with those who teach us. And I think that's really important to have your children learn from you as much as you can, or by your side with you as much as you can, and not turn them over to other teachers. A lot of mistakes people make is they'll find out later that they had a certain instructor or a certain teacher that influenced them the wrong way. And so you can also learn from instruction books on things. You don't always need. Now, I know one mother, she said she just couldn't afford all those extra things, lessons in sports and lessons in piano and lessons in different things that she wasn't able to teach. And she didn't want to send them out to other teachers. She couldn't afford it, and she didn't want to be in the car all the time running. So what she did is she got books and she learned the basics herself so that she could teach her kids, and then the children could learn on their own. The whole idea behind being homeschooled, which I'm trying to do right now, is to learn how to find out things, how to do things, and how to learn, and learn how to live, and how to speak, and how. So sometimes you can learn from other people through their books, but even then you have to be very discerning. And to close today, ladies, I'm going to read to you the introduction to Eric Sloane's weather book, because I talked about weather in the last few broadcasts because it affects the homemaker. I explained that when you are in an institution, let's say work or some kind of education or anything else that you're doing, you're oblivious to the atmosphere that you'll feel at home. Sometimes it might just feel a little bit strange. For one thing, it's more quiet, and it is isolating. You don't have a group around you. You don't have group approval, and it's all up to you to make the list and obey yourself, which I don't. But at least if you don't succeed, you can only blame yourself. You don't have to blame anybody else, and no one can ever fire you. You can fire yourself, I guess. I have so much. Oh, goodness. I think after this I might... I'll do those two things there, I hope. And so I'm going to read the rest of the introduction of Eric Sloane's weather book and what he tried to do. And it was written in 1949, and this is a reprint by Dover Publications. And what he tried to do is take away just this mechanical knowledge of the weather and turn it into something that was deeply connected to the sayings of Jesus Christ and the existence of God. And even though I've seen things written by him about him, I am not sure about it because everything I read in this book was very clean, very good, very wholesome. So So let's see if I don't know if he wrote this or if it was an editor. It says author's note, but I'm not sure. He has a chapter called The Human Side of Weather. And he talks about it being a spiritual quality. And it's nice to go through life less mechanically. And I think that's the way homemaking should be. We're doing it with a spiritual attitude, a spiritual quality, like a service to our fellow man and to God. And it's like the poem I saw her upon a nearer view, a spirit, yet a woman too, her household motions light and free. And so we look at life so much different when we know the feelings we're getting and the sounds we're hearing, because at home you're going to notice them. At work and at any kind of institution, it's all going to be, the noise of that area is going to just drown it all out. You won't notice it. But when you start noticing it, sometimes it can be a little uneasy at home. So I'm going to read Eric Sloane's introduction called Author's Note. And he apparently drew some of the pictures, I'm not sure. So it's called The Human Side of Weather, Chapter 1. The weather is with us wherever we are, yet nothing is more taken for granted than the daily drama of the sky. The heavens are a fairyland filled with marvels to anyone who opens his mind and spirit to them. Facts are often as inspiring as fancies, and what one sees aloft in the skies is as real as anything to be experienced on earth. Our heads are often bowed down with all the material burdens of life, but we know that all through the ages thinking people have found time to look upward and to seek peace and solace in the panorama of weather. When the descendants come, often the first thing they do is go and lay down on the lawn and look up at the sky. Look up under the big boughs of the trees at the sky. They say they find that very calming and health-giving. Emerson called the sky the daily bread of his eyes. Now see, there's another figure of speech, the daily bread of my eyes. Ruskin, and daily bread, of course, is when Jesus said that we were supposed to ask for our daily bread, which I think is quite significant for the homemaker. You know, we're worried about getting a big enough stash in our pantry, how long it will last us if we get, if there's some kind of disaster. But the Bible says give us this day our daily bread. So Emerson called the sky the daily bread of his eyes. Ruskin called it almost human in its passions, almost spiritual in its tenderness, almost divine in its infinity. Lincoln said that he could not imagine a man looking up at the sky and denying God. These spiritual qualities of weather frequently outweigh the adverse influences that rain and snow have on our daily lives. They are, to my way of thinking, important enough to be a part of any book about the weather. This book may help the reader to learn how to forecast tomorrow's weather. More important, it is hoped the book will give to many a new concept of weather, that it will explain the character as well as the mechanics of the sky and the atmosphere. Not everyone can be a meteorologist. Goodness, I said it right this time. But it is easy to be weather-wise, and the pleasure of being close to the weather is endless. Anyone who has known a sailor with a weather eye, and who has also seen the inside of a weather bureau, knows there's a big difference between being weather-wise and being meteorologist. Now, this one I can't do. Meteorologically accurate. The meteorologist is a slave to the barrage of weather map material and mathematical data that bombards him from all over the world and keeps him from looking out at the window at the sky. On the other hand, a man with a weather eye wears his badge of wisdom gracefully. He has a ready alertness to cloud changes, and he has the calm assurance that tonight's rain will give way to a week of good weather. He has the gift of the upward glance, and his sky philosophy makes him a richer person. We also already discussed that after it rains and stopped raining, it's a good time to open the doors and the windows, let in good air. The earth has been freshened. It's good to get outside in that. It's very good for you. And when you go for walks, don't just mechanically walk in whatever weather, but make a note of it. Talk about it. Talk about, look at the sky. Look at the, I had a mother who guided us in these things, and she would tell us about clouds and how you could see things in them, little shapes, and talk to us about, on our walks, about what we were seeing, and not just go through life mechanically. Now, ladies, I hope this has been a help to you in your homemaking. Maybe you are struggling with it and just needed somebody to listen to, and maybe you can find something better that would help you with the actual work and the details of it. And I want to thank you so much for coming, and if you weren't here, I probably wouldn't be as motivated to come and do this. And thank you for your wonderful comments and all your help. And I love you, and I'll see you next time. God bless. Bye.